before Kerry shouts at me because I haven't hit record. Gary Finnan, welcome to Life in a Garden, online eventing. It's so nice of you to join us. What time is it in South Carolina at the moment?
It is 5 past noon.
Noon, so it's lunchtime.
Yeah, it's perfect.
What's for lunch?
No idea. Yeah.
Okay.
No, we've got that far. Yeah.
It's like freezing right now. I have chicken soup on the boil next to me, and I got a blankie out for my mother in case she's cold.
I'm not. We got 98 degrees with 98% humidity.
Oh, that's revolting.
It's actually quite nice. It's nice out. So I was going to sit outside, but I thought last thing I want to do is get all sweaty while I'm talking to you.
Okay, now your accent keeps changing. We've gone from Southern to Irish. What else is in there?
So I'm Scots.
Oh, I'm sorry, I insulted you.
You didn't say English, so we're okay. But I grew up in combination Scotland and South Africa. So and I've been in America for 20 years. So I'm a hybrid.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Like a Prius.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do we have to plug you in as well?
I don't think I can go that far though, but we're okay. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little about yourself besides the fact that you're a hybrid with, do you wear a kilt?
I do, yes.
With anything underneath?
Okay, now you're pushing the limits. So I'll go back to the 5th again.
I push a lot of boundaries.
I have one right now, but I can't stand up. Yeah.
Why can't you stand up?
Yeah, no, I'm joking. Yeah, I grew up in Scotland probably till the age of about 10. Went to South Africa. My parents had the opportunity to immigrate to Canada or South Africa, and South Africa came up first, so we went there. Then we proceeded to move back and forward every 2 years for some reason, no good reason, including a stint in what was then Rhodesia. Came back down into South Africa during the 76 riots, in Soweto riots.
Always a good time to land in South Africa.
Yeah, perfect. Coming out of the Bush War in Zimbabwe or Rhodesia and down into Soweto riots, always good. But I stayed out there and traveled extensively, a couple of times around the world. But I came back down there mid-90s and married an English girl who I married in New York, and brought her down there. We stayed there for 4 years, had 2 children, and we then moved to San Francisco and spent the last 20 years there designing wineries. And
that's a topic on its own that we have to discuss. But anyway, carry on, sorry.
Yeah. So California is fantastic, but it's a little interesting. And then about 3 years ago, we came to South Carolina for a weekend and went home with a house. I think that's about the easiest way to put it. My wife now teaches equine therapy for disabled children.
Oh, that's amazing.
My youngest daughter is actually in the Kruger Park at the moment, training anti-poaching dogs and for a rhino conservation. And my other daughter, my eldest daughter, she lives down in Hilton Head, down on the beach. She has a CBD company. So that's kind of the family. And 4 horses, goats, donkeys, cats. And we live on a little 18-acre farm in a place called Aiken, South Carolina, which is probably the equestrian capital of the South.
It sounds absolutely fabulous. So far I want to speak to both daughters and your wife. Can you move out the way, please?
Yeah, I made sure they weren't here.
Oh, okay, yeah, planning is everything. Gary, do you know how many different definitions of CBD there are?
Sure.
Okay, just checking.
Literally, yeah, no. Well, it's an interesting industry because, let me put it another way. The biggest challenge in America is a good example. I don't think that any really good value of CBD gets there unless you have the THC. And that's where there's a big dilemma nowadays. I do some seminars on marketing and branding around it. And the jury's still out on kind of the holistic value of it. But I think you need both, not to digress too much, but if you don't have the wacky weed aspect introduced into it, then I don't think you get quite as holistic as you could. I think you need a THC as an activator.
Yes, you can get very, very holistic. It's like magic mushrooms, you know.
Yeah.
I believe those are phenomenal for you. Psyllium. Anyway, we really are digressing. Were you on the wacky weed when you wrote Hector? I mean, a talking man-sized live hedgehog.
No, well, there's two answers to that. One, I find I get inspired when I drink good single malt scotch. So it depends, you know. So some of the aspects.
Which scotch do you drink?
I like Glenmorangie, the Quinta Ruban single malt. But with regards to Hector, you know, it's my puke up book, right? It was just something that I think in talking, when we get and talk maybe a little bit about writing and why write, I think everyone has a puke up book in them, and you've got to start somewhere. And Hector was that for me, kind of combination of pre-midlife crisis and a desire to write something. And I thought I was being really clever when I was trying to hide behind a hedgehog. In hindsight, I should have chosen something bigger, because I didn't really hide myself that well. And so it was a huge exercise in vulnerability. And after I finished it, kind of stumbled into Brene Brown and all her stuff, and realized that, you know, there's a lot of us men around there who, you know, we're struggling with the vulnerability component.
My one highlight of reading Hector was bobbing for apples. So it's like, how big are these apples? Are they like, you know, those like little ones that you get in the cans? Because this is how big a hedgehog is.
Right.
Okay, but I was like, hang on. That was the one thing that's kind of like when I sort of suspended belief. But I loved the journey that Hector actually goes on. Can we just go back a little bit, because I kind of jumped into it. Can we tell people what Hector actually is about?
Well, in its simplest form, it's about self-discovery. And I call it a love story. And there's two loves. Well, there's several love stories in there, but it's really about the love story with yourself, where you turn around and, you know, there's a lot of philosophy out there about the principle of when you're 4 or 5 years old, something happens which is fundamental to you. Excuse me, it's fundamental to you, and you believe it. You start to believe it. And then you spend the rest of your life doing what's called a vicious circle, where you're collecting evidence to prove that it's true. So, you know, what's his name? Going straight off the top of my head, the Four Agreements. If you guys are familiar with the Four Agreements, yes. By Don Miguel Ruiz, he talks about the things we believe. So, you know, there's a story in there that he uses where a young child is singing, and the mother comes home and she's had a bad day at work, and she says to the child, you know, shut up, you have an ugly voice. And the child never ever sings ever again. So for me, in my now candid perspective, having written Hector, it was when I was 5 years old and a teacher told me I was stupid because I couldn't write the number 5. You'll see the number 5 is, you know, everything I do is based around the number 5, almost as a screw you kind of pushback. But it was that belief at that time that, you know, I couldn't write the number 5. I wasn't stupid. I just never had a teacher who would take the time to actually help me do it. Sounds simple enough, but it has prolonged, lifelong effects on you. So Hector was really about stepping back and going, what are the things we believe? What are the principles that we carry forward in our lives? You know, And I think it has a huge impact. So also metaphorically, there's the prickly outside and the soft underbelly. We all have it. We all have our exterior representation, but underneath we're all really quite vulnerable, soft, and we curl up in these balls to protect ourselves.
And in my case, cuddly.
Cuddly?
Yes, cuddly.
Oh, cuddly, okay.
Oh, ugly.
Cuddly, not ugly. Thanks, Mom. See, I have
Just as well she didn't say that when you were 5. There you go.
No, but it's funny you should say that, because I had a maths teacher, and I imagine I was probably about, oh God, the child scream. I would imagine I was about 6, because it was 6 or 7, and this teacher screamed. We were there after school.
Yeah.
Mrs. Louie, I've never forgotten her. I hated her like poison. I'm sure she's dead by now. In fact, I hope so. He was horrible, and she screamed and shouted because we couldn't, I think there were 2 of us, couldn't work out this little maths problem, like 3 and 4, whatever. Yeah. And so I understand that completely, because I hate maths to this day. I mean, I can add, but she really ruined it. And I've had an English teacher in high school who ruined it for me as well. She told me in creative writing there was no such thing as a marshmallow cloud, and I have never forgotten that. So I don't write. I hated English at school. So I get it.
So that's the principle that in this Hector that I just re-released, the one that I sent to you, which I went to find a copy, and I don't actually have one. I'm waiting for a new batch to come. But in the back of it, my evolution in doing that was to get to creative expression. And what I did with Hector initially was to use it where same thing with me. I'm not particularly I wouldn't call myself a great writer, but I've always had the desire to write. So for me, all of us have this element of creative expression. We have a desire, it doesn't matter what it is, and it burns deep in you. But when people say things to you or you believe stuff, you suppress it, you suppress it, you suppress it. And we've all done, I guarantee you, every single person watching here at the moment, which I should say hello to everybody, by the way. Sorry, I didn't do that to kick in. But we've all done it. We all have aspects of it. And for me, true creative expression is the difference between being alive and being dead. You can either live in reason or you can live in passion. And most of us live in reason. Probably 80 to 95 to 99% of our life, we live in reason. I must do this. I should do that. I believe this is, all these agreements that we make. Whereas the other aspect of our life is living in passion. And I had a discussion with a friend of mine the other day, particularly with what's going on in around America, is saying, there's a lot of passionate people. I said, well, before you get to passion, you have to understand what is your purpose. Then you understand how to carry your purpose forward with passion. So writing particularly is really interesting. And we do a lot of retreats. We used to do retreats before we got shut down in places like Sedona, California, Italy, etc., where we would see people turn up. They had a burning desire to write or be creative, whether it was writing, painting, whatever, but they never did it because they got told they shouldn't. They weren't good enough. They couldn't do that. And that's really kind of the essence of what I wanted Hector to be, particularly this revision where I added aspects to the end of it. I leapt in, excuse me, there, and started to share my little ramblings. Now, are they any good? Does it really matter? I had somebody the other day said to me, you didn't follow proper poetry protocol, however those standards are meant. I went, yep, you're right. I call them, Scottish haiku. It doesn't have to actually mean anything other than sometimes when I was younger, I used to write pieces of my ramblings in the shape of the words. The words would shape on the page. I'm a designer by trade. Interior architecture. So sometimes the shape of the words on the page is kind of like Dr. Seuss. That's almost more important than what the words are. So the idea of saying to people, it's okay, just write it down. Just on Instagram recently, I've been putting ramblings and Hectorisms out there on Instagram and challenging people to say, write something. It doesn't matter what it is. And so from there, that small incubator of creative expression, something else comes and something else comes. And then you decide to write, well, you know what, maybe I'll join them all together and make a little story. And then it expands from there. And that to me is, if there's a why, it's a good enough reason. And no one has to read it, but it's really important to share it. That's a huge leap. Most people don't share because they're embarrassed or think that it's not good enough, and that's garbage.
So basically, you read Hector, and it reads a love story over the different decades of Hector's life with his wife Hillary, and then you pick up the book. Hillary picks up the book, and she starts to read Hector's musings. Are those your musings or Hector's musings?
And therein lies the question. Well, you know what was interesting when they're ours. Let me put it that way. I live my life vicariously through a hedgehog. That's why I said I should have chosen something bigger to hide behind. It's a very personal book, and I didn't realize how personal it was until I did my first reading, and I stood up and started to read it and burst into tears.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah,
Man who can cry. I love that.
yeah, and that's why in many ways you write for yourself, and if you're really lucky, people like it. That's how I look at it, you know. So, answer your question. Yeah, there is not me as there are him. But Hector also took on a life of his own, and that that's what becomes interesting. And any writing, like with your characters, with my most recent book, Billy Tapper, it's absolutely fascinating to have people get together with you and start telling you what your story means, asking you questions about characters and aspects of their personalities. To me, that's what's great. And you start to create this new dialogue. And even with Hector, it's an interpretation of those ramblings. Like any poetry, what's so great is people interpret it, and they're going to take from it what they want to take from it. That's why I like to tell people, start writing some sort of form of rambling poetry, whatever it is. And it's also very hard because you've got to condense it down into, a dozen lines rather than a dozen pages. I find it a lot of fun.
I want to ask you on a personal level. Hector is at one point detached from his wife, and he only when he goes on his little rambling journey through the forest and comes home does he realize that. Did you and your wife go through a similar experience?
100%. And that's what made it very difficult for not only my wife but other people to read it. It's completely honest, ambiguous but honest. And at the end of the day, yeah, we were going through a tough time at the time. And when I originally wrote the book, it did not have a good ending. And several friends of ours read it. And that's when I changed the story. Things got better, and then changed the story into kind of a parable. When he has the dream sequence of when he's going through some tough times, and there was a lot of upset people when they were reading it. But what is this? More so than anyone, my wife.
Oh, I didn't know we were going through that, but thank you for telling me. Yes.
Yeah. Well, she said, I didn't think you were going to write it down and share it with the world. That's maybe another way to put it. But I think coming through all of that for me was a commitment to, and it's, what is it, 5-6 years now since I wrote the book, and then doing the revision of it, and the second phase of you'll see the Hector's ramblings transitioned into kind of more long-form poetry. I don't know how many of those you read, but hopefully you saw the transition. There was also some beauty, I think, in some of those, the transition in how they articulated his love or his experiences? Maybe better you tell me than me tell you.
There was one I particularly liked called The Beast.
Uh-huh.
Hold your tongue, that slippery beast, betrayer of thoughts, boaster of egos, a whip of wit that kills souls in a word. Wild horses of voice cascade forth in a verbal deluge, spewing thoughts of my own making. Running free within and without, looking down on oneself always leaves destruction in its wake, viewed as perception, but by the self of my soul's sake, be gentle. I really, you see, I did read them, just so you know.
Yeah.
Not all of them. I will admit I didn't read all of them because there were a lot. And then there were more. Okay, I wasn't expecting them all.
Well, somebody said to me I was indulgent in putting all of that in there. But the book is really well, firstly, thank you for reading that. And where that came from, there was two epiphanies for that. Firstly, we don't often hear the words that come out of our mouth, and we can do a lot of damage. As we said, your math teacher probably had no perception of the damage that she did, left in her wake. But I had another friend of mine, a gentleman called Tom Mitchell, who I do a lot of work with, and he's written several books. He's a really special guy, and he starts off his seminars with going, let me tell you about the people I've killed.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, what? He's a basketball coach. And everybody's like, you killed people? And he goes on for quite a long time before he reveals that his words have killed people. His words have changed people's lives for the better and for the worst. And he has literally killed people, their ambition, coaching someone who had the potential to be a great basketball star. And he had the epiphany of being a teacher and realizing the responsibility of his words. So yeah, our tongues can be very deadly machines or deadly tools.
My father used to say, your ears don't hear what your mouth says.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that coin is that you open your mouth and you sound like your mother. I discovered that in my late 20s. Like suddenly I said something, oh my God, my mother just came out of my mouth. Frightening.
But that's got a lot to do with the indoctrination, though. And that's why it's so hard to pivot sometimes. That's where, again, in the end of this Hector book, I added a section called Evoke. And it's the precursor to the book that I'm writing at the moment, which is based on Be Prepared to Stop. Because none of us, particularly at the moment, were not prepared to stop.
No.
Like, what? I have to stop. And so I was in California during the California wildfires, and I was stuck on a road, kind of engulfed with flames. And there was a big sign there that, these big orange signs, which I have one in my office now, said, be prepared to stop, on the side of the road. And it really hit me that we're not prepared to stop. And even going back to Hector, to sit down and write something, to sit down and be vulnerable, to shift the job that you hate, to change your relationships with people. Back to that, your initial question of what's Hector about. It's about stopping and finding that first love of yourself and saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, I didn't know how to write the number 5 when I was 5 years old, but that doesn't need to be the thing I carry on my back for the rest of my life. But it also gets you to the point where you get to stand up straight and go, hey, you know what are the things that David White, are you familiar with David White, the poet?
No.
English poet, great poet. And I just went to Ireland for one of his retreats just before COVID started. And he writes a piece of poetry called Sweet Darkness. I would recommend anyone read it. But the last stanza says, anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. And it's not written in a arrogant way. It's asking you the question to say, what brings you alive? And that's maybe the theme of Hector in some level, that he's looking to find out, how, hold on a minute. Yep, someone just said they attended the same retreat. Okay, that's great. Sorry, I missed that there.
Stunning.
We should always be asking that question. One of my favorite parts is writing about the sharp edges or the dull edges of our life, never mind the sharp edges. And I don't have it here to even read to you. I don't have it in here. I've got the old version. I went to dig it out and realized that I didn't have any left in my office. But it's pushing against the dull edges of our life. And again, sorry.
If you want, I can look for it.
Yeah, let me just have a quick scan here and just see if I wrote it somewhere, if you would. Yeah, and I do apologize by not having it. I thought I had a book. But anyway, the point being is, what brings you alive? I think it's really important. And most of us kind of push that to the side and we let it get covered with the dust of reason. You know, these are the things, I've said this already. What do we have to do in our lives? Instead of stopping and going, yeah, what brings me alive? And I think so Hector is constantly probing and pushing and going, you know, this is what I was told to do. This is who I should be. These are all of the things that we believe. And are they true? Hell no, they're not. They're just things that we take on as agreements. And so I like to think that Hector stumbles along, and that, you know, and there is metaphorically, he's a hedgehog because he's on the ground. And he has his epiphany one day when he realizes that, you know, he's been stomping through the daisies and on top of them. And that literally happened to me where I got my kids up, but I don't realize I'm in this field of beautiful daisies. I'm just stomping around, you know. And
in demand.
Stomping around and not realizing the beauty that's right around you. And so when I lay down on the ground and I'm lying there with my kids and I start looking all these little daisies and everyone is different, that's kind of where Hector has that same epiphany. And I see somebody down there. Kerry's got a bunch of flowers there. It's quite in her picture there. We've got to start to string together. You know, we've all made daisy chains. I'm sure you guys have all made daisy chains at some point.
And so does Hector.
And yeah, and so you start stringing them together, and you know, there's tall ones, there's short ones, there's pretty ones, there's brown ones. This is the chain of our life. These are all the aspects. If we weave it all together, it's not perfect, it's not beautiful, but when you put it around your neck or make a little bracelet, it's quite beautiful. And those are the things that, you know, Hector starts to realize the gifts that he has. And so likewise myself, suddenly going, wow, what are you complaining about? What are you so upset about? You know, it's all a load of crap.
Yeah, is it important in the scheme of things?
In the great scheme of things, yes.
Yeah. I mean, did you do any research into what hedgehogs eat?
Not really. I kind of had my own. I made up quite a delicious.
You did.
Of things that I thought would be kind of cool. You know,
I know, it's fabulous. Like little, what was it, slug pies and little
maggot cakes.
Yes.
And gnat juice. And
sprinkled with the wings of flies or something. It was absolutely fabulous. The different ideas that you came up for what hedgehogs eats when they go on picnics. I loved it.
Yeah, and what they drink. You know, I knew Hector wouldn't be drinking single malt scotch, but I had an aunt once down in Newcastle in England that we used to go visit, and she used to make elderberry wine. She got very upset when one day I thought it was the trash, so I emptied her ashtray into it. And so the wine that she was making in these big white buckets was full of cigarette butts and ash. But being a good Scottish woman, she just sieved them out, and the wine was even better the next year. You know, so she wasn't going to throw that stuff away. But
yeah. After you've read Hector's story from birth to 50 and looking forward to 60, and then we read a bit of the poetry, and then we go a little bit back to the story, and then we hit a workbook at the end.
Yes.
Why did you feel it was necessary to put that in? Did you want people to become more self-aware, like your self-aware hedgehog?
Yeah. So the reason I did that, I released the initial book without any of that in it. You know, it's good. My puke up, and it did quite well, and it won some awards as an inspirational book, which was a surprise for me. which was kind of great because it got recognition outside of all the people I could bribe to read it. But then what ended up happening was people started to ask, well, how do I write? And we started to do these creative expression retreats. So in that process, in the 5 or 6 years after I wrote it, it kind of evolved into a little bit more. I was writing more. I developed a process called Evoke, which is kind of going back into our DNA of who we are, back to that 5-year-old kid. And the Evoke aspect, the DNA was an acronym for discover your essence, nurture an epiphany, and act. Invoke an action. So I started to do that and expanded my whole business. Actually, we expanded the model out, and now we do it for individuals, we do it for professionals, and we do it for corporations. And it works, right? I was on the phone this morning with the African Wildlife Foundation and a safari company, and we're using the process to bring the two of them together in alignment during COVID. And the reason we're going to use it is we're bringing them back to being the essence of who they were when they started their company 30 years ago. So I'm digressing a little bit. All of this comes from Hectorisms. It comes from that question of, who am I? How do I work as a human? And Hector asking himself, how do I work as a hedgehog human, so to speak? Like, what's my core principal beliefs? And lost my train of thought completely.
Get a whiskey quickly.
I know, yeah. So, yeah, a lot of it kind of. So back to the workbook. That was it. I've evolved it, and I started to work with people, and I wanted to share that because it's really simple. It's based on 5 elements. Like I said, 5 are my thing. Message, purpose, people, place, and return. So what's the message that I want to convey to the world? Okay, not the one that I've necessarily been conveying, but I wanted the message I truly want to convey, the true message of who I am. What do I put out to the world? And if you preface this with the thought that who you are now, who you really think you want to be, you got to go through transition. You can't just go from my life's crappy, I'm not happy, I'm not telling the truth, to I'm an enlightened being. You've got to go through what I call the knothole of pain, right? But to do that, in many ways, what we do is the burrow of pain, maybe that's a good way to put it. And that's why Hector goes in and out of his burrow having these epiphanies. But anyway, the point being is, if you think about the language you use, if I had to sit you down and go through an exercise with you, we all use the same language. We've made agreements, same way. A lot of the language you're using, you might be when you were 5 years old. You still use it to describe yourself, to explain what it is that you do, justify your existence. I want to challenge that language. So what's my message? What do I put out to the world? What's my purpose? What do I wake up every day and is my driving desire? Message, purpose, people. Who do I engage with? Who are the people that I live around? Who are my friends? Who are my peers? Place. Where do I engage? Where does my message, purpose, and people engage? In what place? And then all of that, if they're in alignment, what do I get back? What's my return on investment? And sometimes we don't stop to ask these questions. I'm conveying the wrong message. People perceive me in the wrong way. I don't understand why they don't get me. What's my purpose? I have one, or I don't have one. What brings me alive? Message, purpose, people. Why am I not engaged with the people I'm with? Why am I in the wrong relationships? But I keep beating my head against the wall. Message, purpose, people, place. Where, even down to where do I live? I have no justification of living in South Carolina, but I came here, seemed really interesting. So we moved our whole family and our house here. And I don't know how long we'll be here, but we're here and we're living fully here, right? So that might change. And then the return, what brings me alive? What do I get back? So asking those questions is really what the Evoke process is. So from a creative point of view. I wanted to put that into the Hector book to give people a map. This isn't a Tony Robbins, follow these 5 steps and you'll get rich kind of crap, if you excuse my language. But the reality is, it's what I call it's not self-help, it's self-epiphany. I want people to go, oh my God, that's what I've been burning desire in my chest for all these years, and I just never articulated it. And so part of where that came in, and I said earlier to you guys about midlife crisis, I call it midlife epiphany, is not so much of having one, because I think I have one about every 2 years.
Yeah.
And since I intend to live till I'm 108, I only just had my midlife crisis, so we're okay, right? But I digress.
Have you bought the cow catcher yet?
Pardon?
Have you bought the cow catcher yet?
The cow catcher? No, I haven't. Is that a book?
No, that's a vehicle.
A vehicle. The cow
vehicle,
catcher.
a Porsche.
Okay. No. No.
Okay, so you're not really having a midlife crisis then.
Well, actually, David White told a great story that he was talking about, where he was talking about a guy who he was looking up motorcycles, and there was an ad in the newspaper that said, new Harley Davidson, only 3 months old, bought during midlife crisis, had second thoughts, so I got a farm. Maybe this is my midlife crisis. I got a farm and 4 horses to feed,
I think that's a fantastic midlife crisis, personally. I would love to live in the country on the farm. That would be my, with great Wi-Fi though. It would have to have a fabulous internet connection. Otherwise the whole thing is, down the toilet.
It does make it difficult. But back to kind of the 3 pieces of the book. There's a piece in there that I'm sure you want to chat about, which is, what if your life was 24 hours long? That was kind of the piece for me that again, I woke up one day and it was like, oh, what if? And I saw a statistic that said, your average lifespan is 78.4 years. It's about 76 years for men, and it's about 81 years for women. And this is a statistic. And so what I was intrigued with that was, what happens if my life was a 24-hour clock? And so at 3:15 in the afternoon, I would have 9 hours left, plus minus 9 hours, 8 hours and 45 minutes left to live. And that really kind of went, oh shit, right? And then I started to think about it and get into it, go, so what changes do I have to make? Because Charlie Chaplin lived right through to 6 o'clock the next morning. Or George Burns did. Charlie Chaplin lived till he was 96. There's all these great people who they've made decisions in their life to change. So somewhere between 50 and 60, if you're going to have this midlife epiphany, what does that mean? Do you mean you look after your body? Do you change where you live? Do you change how you behave? Do you do what brings you alive? And I really wanted to challenge people. I've got a friend of mine who just had a heart attack and in California. And I said to him, you've only got 7 hours left to live if you don't sort your shit out, right? Because you'll die at 78.4 years old because you haven't looked after yourself, you haven't shifted and changed, you're not bringing yourself alive. And it's been really interesting dealing with him. So that's why, that's kind of, Hector is part parable, part creativity, part evoking people to say, well, what happens? What? And then there's an exercise in there where I took my Hectorisms and he asks you the question, the same questions he would ask himself.
Yeah.
At the end. And so you can fill that in and write it. I've had a few people who have done that, but it's really quite brand new. I haven't really promoted or done very much with the revised version, but that's all it really was to get people, provoke people or evoke them to start to ask questions that maybe they're not going to die at midnight. Maybe they're going to turn around and be, I always say 2 o'clock in the morning is when the party normally gets going. 12 o'clock, it's kind of warmed up. 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, brilliant. Being Scottish, we do Hogmanay. And so
absolutely.
I like, if I don't get to go all the way through to making breakfast the day after New Year's, we haven't had a good party. right? And everybody knows, they're like, oh my God, we got to stay at Gary's house until 8 o'clock the next morning just so he can cook breakfast. That brings me alive. And that's what fun is. And so, I'm not going to die at, hopefully not, touch wood, at 78.4 years old. I want to make the changes that are going to let me live to 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. But to do that, something's got to change. And the most fundamental thing that's got to change is creative expression. You got to get that thing out. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's bad. It's about writing it, singing it, dancing it. It doesn't matter. And then sharing it is really important. There's some people who say, you don't need to share. I truly believe that you can't write until you share it, because that's the epitome of your vulnerability.
So what would you,
yeah.
So would you suggest to people that they start journaling as a place to start, or where would be your start point?
I write in Hector about he has ramblings on pieces of paper stuck under whiskey glasses and under lampshades and in books. And I do. I mean, if you see anything in my house, there's bits of paper, there's things ripped out. I think that's where it starts. You just start kind of building a nest of ideas. Like, I'm almost like that rat's nest. Oh, here's an idea. Or, yellow stickies, write stuff on them and then just have them in. Quite often, I have books and that I stuff stuff into, but it's just write it down. Nowadays on my phone, the notebook component of it, I've kind of got into the habit now of going, let me quickly write that down. And which actually has been interesting, because I don't know why, but I've got in recently into wanting to write erotic poetry.
Oh,
excuse
me.
So, so I haven't shared that yet.
Oh, have you written any? Because
oh no, I have. I in the last month I must have written about 30.
Okay, we have to hear one. You've opened the door. Now you have to say one.
Well, they're really naughty. I can't tell. Yeah.
You can turn your screen off, but you have to recite one for us. If you're going to blush, or
okay. Well, let me finish what I was saying. I won't blush. I'm okay with it, but yeah, okay.
I can make you blush.
but the
you're already blushing.
I know. Thanks. But you got to write stuff down, and you just got to. Did any of you seen? Is it Melissa Gilbert, the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love?
Yeah.
I always get her name muddled up with the girl who's on the Little House on the Prairie. But anyway, Melissa Gilbert, I think it is.
You're showing your age, just by the way, if you're talking about the Little House on the Prairie.
I know. This didn't come from nowhere, But well, I think that was when South Africa only had 1 hour of TV a week, back in the 70s or something like that. Anyway, Melissa Gilbert, she does on her TED Talk. It's really worth watching a TED Talk about creativity. And she talks about how in the past, genius was something that lived ethereally in the walls. The ancient Greeks and Romans believed, the genius was in the walls. But in the early 1900s, we started to call people genius. And she tells how all the ideas, all the pieces of writing, everything is out there in the universe. And if you're open to it, it comes through you. I find I get more open the more whiskey I drink, then it pours in, right? It just it comes from nowhere. But the reality is, if you don't take it and you don't do anything with it, it will go to the next person. It'll just float off and it'll drop into someone else's head. And she tells 2 stories. One of a famous poet who was out hanging washing on the washing line, and she can hear the poem coming. And she's running to the house, trying to carry her laundry and get to the house and get a pen and paper before the poem arrives. And she's trying to write, and it comes through and it goes out the other side of the house, and she's pulling it back and she writes all the words down in reverse, And then Tom Waite is in Los Angeles and he's in traffic in the middle of LA, which if you've ever been there and done that, it's horrendous. And the sunroof is open and this beautiful melody comes into his head. And he looks through the sunroof and he goes, really? Now? This is when you want to give me this beautiful melody? And so that's why, phones are great, because you just pop the idea in, put it into your head and put it down. And there's no rights or wrong. and leave it. And then, sometimes I'll go back through and I'll just start rummaging and I'll find something. And then you can expand, because you'll never get that thought back again, that little inspiration. So yeah, I believe everybody should write something down. And did I get out of the erotic poetry piece?
Go on. I actually love the record option on the phone, because often at night, my brain decides, like, as soon as I turn the light out, oh wow, let's go into overdrive and start thinking about shit. So sometimes I write novels in my head, and then I just grab the record and I start recording whatever idea I had. And then when I listen to it in the morning, I think, oh my God, that was terrible. What were you thinking? So that novel's never going to happen.
Well, I sometimes get drunk and I can't understand myself the next day if I did that.
My handwriting is so bad that I can't read my shopping list when I go shopping. So now I actually use my phone to put the shopping list on.
Right.
So if anybody's embarrassed by this erotic poetry, feel free to turn your camera off.
Well, I'm going to give you one that isn't really overly naughty, which, by the way, this might be an interesting topic for you. I was just thinking about, with COVID going on, I was actually thinking of putting a class together for storytellers, but doing it around phone sex, teaching people how to write stories around phone sex, because there's so many people who can't get together, but they're really, really bad at phone sex. And so I thought it would be a great class to have a bunch of people engaging around erotic. This is kind of where this all stemmed from. And I've been writing stuff going, yeah, I wonder what that would sound like, Anyway, so I'm trying to find something that isn't too really naughty.
Anybody around here been sexting lately? Come on, don't all get shy on me. Tell me if you've been sexting. No, nobody's saying anything. There's nothing coming up in the chat box.
We got one there.
Oh,
have you, Mandy?
Yes.
Mariana?
Have you, Mandy?
Darling, I'm not getting any at the moment. In fact, my mother and I were having this conversation today. Like, how do you have sex with your boyfriend? Do you have to wear a mask and kiss through the mask? Or do you have to have it, like, with my mother? Did you notice that I said my mother and I were having this conversation? It's like doing it doggy style, because you're not breathing on the person or something. Then you only have to like sanitize your back afterwards. I mean, really, this has made life very interesting. So a lot of people haven't had it in about 6 months already. 3 months. Where are we now? It feels like a year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to find one that isn't too bad, because they're a little.
It's okay, we're all adults here, Gary. Be brave.
Okay.
And then I'm going to like erotic poem, Hector the Hedgehog. Erotic poem, Hector the Hedgehog. There's no way to marry the two. I mean, Hector is like reading Watership Down, or what are the other Secret of Nim and stuff like that. And then you go erotic poetry.
Well, one of the things, just to do a little promo, I haven't shared this with you. So this is my new book, Billy Tapper, Zillionaire, and it's about it's kind of a real life Hector. I'm a little boy who is least likely to succeed, and there's a lot of naughtiness in this one. By page 12, he's had sex up against a wall with.
I hope he's not a little boy still.
No, well, it's post Second World War, and his girlfriend, I think she's 15 or 16, and he's 17 or 18. But there was a lot of naughtiness in this book, and a lot of it got edited down, which was a bit disappointing. But I'm going to bring it back in the second book, where So I think naughtiness is really good.
You mean when he comes of age?
Yeah, well, yeah, when he comes of age, yeah. And but I think everybody should write something naughty once in a while. I think it's important.
I'm still waiting to hear one of yours. Were you trying to like sidetrack the conversation?
Oh, let me see. Oh, this one's a little long, but it's kind of a story / let me see. If you want to hear this, let me just say, I don't. This is kind of vulnerable. I'm not even sure this is good. Here we go. Okay, it's called Just Peachy. Too Cajun for me, he choked. Her fingers danced over the shrimp, making his eyes water and run red. His mouth is on fire and burning, the tip of his tongue, she hopes. Across the table, pickled cabbage, and her stains her teeth like red wine. Full lips and salivating at the tartness, or at the thought of his mouth on hers, an Epicurean tryst of discovered tastes. The host voyeurs to their own menage, and he a happy lamb to the slaughter. She lures him under no pretense. Her hunger on lips, licking creamy grits, a desire roused at the shape of her mouth. Let's play a game on the table or floor, on skin, on bone, the darkest feast, removing inhibition, one fear at a time, gouging into the underbelly soft as peaches, juicy extraction of hidden desires and lust. Just lie down on the floor, she directs, spreads his arms in crucifixion between chairs, outside legs of each chair centered on his palms. Kind of funny, he thought. Ouch, as she pressed, grinding and laughing at his pain, she smiled. The chairs are for her balance, she promised, gently coaxing his head into a sack bag, drawstring throat tight and slit cut for breath. Her peachy fingers tease his dusty cough, choking on saliva and a heady scent. Stilettos click down on wood at each ear. He smells the leather and licks his lips, faint outline hovering omnipresent above. He can hear sheer panties departing thighs and air thick with the sensual moisture of her. Light summer dress hiked up in bunches, the first drop shocking on his parched mouth. A peach pressed to her naked tummy drips. Sticky elixir crushed against skin running over vibrant mound between tense thighs. Pain forgotten at quenched thirst craving, his arousal profound under her gaze. Lower now she squats, open to his mouth. Burning tongue catches her in surprise, her full weight on teetering chairs drill. They both moan in pain, pleasure, dropping to her knees in full discharge. He gulps for air and consumes her passion, mouths pulsing to the rhythm. To her rhythm, he drinks deeply from her throat, a vulgar growl from that pit. Tart, pie, tort, pandy-dower, sonker, grunt, scrumple, bruggles, crisp, cruscade, bird's nest pudding, it may be named as she teases. Not one sweet as mine shrouded in gossamer, his sack removed to applause of the others, grateful invitation and medal of bloody palms. The recount is joy through spoons hard to hold. What feast is next, dare he ask to join, her desire bold and extracting a heavy toll, but he is smitten and her bright scarves lure. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
It sounds like a lot of BDSM to me, dude.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Also includes, peach cobbler was kind of the feast.
It's very southern.
Yes. I was left at home with a peach pie one day, didn't know what to do. You caught me unawares there. I don't know if did that make sense?
Yes. It did. I was trying to just envision how she was like sitting on the chairs, but you know, that was like Jean-Claude Van Damme moment, was it?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I once wrote something that this kind of came from, where a writer was not writing, and he asked his partner to basically, put him in a basement and only at 4 o'clock every day, if he's written enough words, does he get let out and is given the ability to give her pleasure if he's written enough words. So there's another whole story there.
Oh, that just sounds, I think you missed your vocation there, my boy. Like, never mind self-help. We should be doing erotic fantasy. Okay, that's a
Well,
story for another day.
let's see. Back to Hector. Yeah.
Yeah, back to Hector. Let's go back to that cute little hedgehog after
Yeah.
suspense-filled chairs and leather whips and chains and whatnot. I love this. Your accent makes it even better. That was fabulous. Thanks. And it was Elizabeth Gilbert, not Melissa Gilbert, just to answer your.
There we go. I told you I always get it wrong, right? I got a weird thing for those girls, A Little House on the Prairie, and that's just weird. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm a little. Yeah. So what about Little Women? You know.
I just watched that the other day. I liked that. Yeah, it was good.
We'll leave Pride and Prejudice out of this completely.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any questions for Gary before we let him go? Because we've been talking for nearly an hour, Gary. In fact, we've been talking for over an hour.
Yeah, it went quickly. Yeah,
it did, particularly when we started on the erotic poetry. Then it just seemed to fly by.
Well, you kind of caught me, so I don't think I kind of gave it enough kind of like reading. I was just talking. I just met this woman. I just had dinner with her. And this is actually a great little book. I met her husband at Home Depot, and but this is a great little book. It's not actually about becoming the singer you are. It's about singing, but it's actually about your voice. And so one of the things I wanted to do was I actually want to recite all of the Hector poetry and kind of put it together and do something with it. But I think I need to learn how to read my own stuff first. Again, David White is he's really great at having his rhythm and how he repeats stuff. And just as a sideline on talking about creativity, with Billy originally, until it got edited out, I wrote a song for every chapter, and I have no musical ability. But one of the first songs, I met some people that I hired for a party at my house and asked them if we could record this song. So there's no limit to what you can do other than your own. And it doesn't mean it has to be any good. But we fully produced this song from this book, and it was a lot of fun. So hopefully work with this woman, and I can get a little.
Find your voice.
Find your voice, yeah.
Find your
and
voice.
It's just one of those other things that one of those things that I think it's about creative expression. There's no unless you say it.
I did it once. I do sculpture, and I did a whole series of little erotic sculptures. I think my teacher was a bit horrified about having these. They had to stand on the top shelf facing the wall so that nobody got offended by them. Yeah, and they actually all sold, which was really funny. I mean, there were only about 5 of them. There was a little series, but
so again, it's creative expression. I sculpt as well. I sculpt pregnant women, and again, I can't emphasize enough on how important it is to do that. I mean, it's so important.
What do you mean you sculpt pregnant women?
I sculpt them. I have a few.
Out of what?
I cast them in bronze. So I found this amazing piece of wood that kind of on the beach that curls through itself and goes up. So I have a woman who's basically a pregnant Christ.
Okay, there's just yeah.
Yeah, so if you're gonna, but yeah, and I've got some other ones. It's all I'm a great believer. With everything in my house is female, so horses, dogs, cats, whatever.
God. And
my wife's female as well, which I find interesting. But as a joke, I love pregnant women. I think my wife was never more beautiful than when she was pregnant, and I think they're just fascinating. The shapes, the same thing, are just beautiful. So anyway, yeah.
Okay, so you're into fertility.
Yeah, well, I'm really hoping we get a female president in America at some point. It's about time,
We're actually hoping that you get a decent president in America at some point. Kind of like we hope the same for South Africa.
Yeah, we don't have another 4 hours, right? Yeah.
No, but we can come back. Are you pro-Trump or anti-Trump? We can do that as a parting shot.
Yeah,
You have your moments, in other words.
I'm not going to comment. It's too, it's too vulnerable in this country. It's too precarious. So I just tell everybody, you know what? Everything for me is about being human. And if you can display human characteristics and have compassion and empathy, you might have your answer.
If you have compassion and empathy, you're actually a more evolved human being. I think that's really what it boils down to.
And some people are less evolved than others.
Some are less evolved than others. Absolutely. Are there any other questions for Gary, or can we let him go and have his lunch? A glass of wine and a horse ride.
I want at least one question. I never finish anything without someone asking a question, because I think otherwise we haven't done our job. So
come on, Shamini, ask a question.
I need one question.
Ask him to read another poem, Shamini. Come on, I have asked all the questions. It's up to you. Nadine, Janice, Gerda, ask a question. Come on. Janice, this is your job. You ask literary questions.
Mariana was the one who's doing the sexting. We need to maybe get she was waving her hands.
Now she's blushing.
Yeah.
Gary, we're not going to get a question out of these people. They've all gone shy on us.
So just one thing I was going to pull out. I don't know if I realized years, if any of you have ever read this book.
Duncan Wood.
It's called Duncan Wood.
Loved it.
And I just found it on a discontinued site. But I realized way back when I was 10 years old, I read that book, and I kind of realized that's probably where Hector came from.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all I say is I would love to, if anybody wants to share a rambling, you can feed it through Mandi. But I want to put it out as a challenge to each of you, those of you who either do or don't write. Ramble down something, write something, 5 lines, and share it with this group.
5-line challenge. Send it to me and I'll forward it to Gary. Gary, just before I let you go, your books are available on Amazon?
Correct, yes.
Amazon America or Amazon UK?
And they should be everywhere. Yeah,
okay.
They should be. Amazon's weird, to try and get stuff out there. But again, in a small group like this, I'm happy to send over a PDF or something like that if somebody wants to read it. But either can't afford to get it, or if it's not available, like I did. I sent over.
Yeah, you sent me the PDF. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. It's available on Kindle. In fact, Gerda, you said you downloaded it, didn't you, Gerda? Or was that you did tell me you downloaded something. I can't remember what it was. Yes, yeah. Gerda's downloaded your book.
My children will eat for another week. Very good.
As long as they're not eating grub pies and gossamer wing glaze. Anyway.
Yeah.
Gary,
you should try those things. They're all good.
You should have put a little recipe book at the back. That's the next thing. Hedgehog recipes.
Hedgehog recipes.
And I don't mean cook the hedgehog. I mean, food hedgehogs eat recipes. Gary, it's been spectacular. Thank you. Wonderful to chat to you this afternoon, this evening. And everything of the best. Let's keep evoking.
Well, when you have a space again and you have nothing to do, I'm going to promote Billy, and I'd love to chat about that when you have a gap yet again.
Lovely. I'm absolutely happy to do that, and I'm sure the ladies would. But then there's a fee for that. You have to recite more erotic poetry. We need one to start it off with, and then one to finish it off with. So we go out in a blaze of glory.
Okay. Okay. I tell you what, I did. Let me give you one. I know we're over time, but you know what?
There's no such thing as overtime. I gave us 90 minutes so we could ramble.
Oh, you did?
I did.
So let me see. I had one about an oyster.
Oh, gosh. Oyster, mango, guava.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a nice thing about South Africa is, they're one of the few places that, use the word guava, and it's got so many meanings. This is called Yeah, I just did this yesterday, and it's kind of, I'm not sure about it. And you're catching me because I haven't been through these and checked them out whether they work or not. But since I'm proponent of vulnerability and sharing, I'll throw it out there.
Fabulous.
So it's a texture thing. You know what I'm talking about. So visual provocateur, you are when opened. Folds of simulated labia enticing. Hidden in crusty shell deceptively, how well she mimics you. In both hands I grasp, dull instrument ply her open, hungry mouth supping, juices over searching lips. Her flesh consumed and so willingly given, her sacrifice is her joy. She set me ablaze without. She is all within, a secret place sought, her lavish gift devoured. And shell cast aside. Visual provocateur you were when opened, folds of simulated labia enticed, hidden in crusty shell perceptibly, how well you mimic her. Dashed to the rocks am I.
Where was the Tabasco and the oyster fork?
Yeah, we didn't get that far.
Well, like no lemon juice, no black pepper, no Tabasco, and no fork. Damn it.
Therefore, that's the problem. You see, you don't need any embellishments on something that tastes so good.
Like okay, and we're gonna leave it right there, everybody.
You set me up for that one. There you go.
Gary, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Guys, don't forget, tomorrow we're going to Canada. We're going to the Yukon to chat to Dan Grech about his circumnavigation of the African continent and his trip from Alaska to Argentina. So join us. That's at 7 p.m. Joburg time, okay? Have a nice evening, everybody. Have a great day, Gary, and thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.